allpointtv.com, and we're glad to see you out there. And we're going to be here for the next hour. It's another Monday, Blue Monday. That's what is that? That's Domino, Blue Monday. Can't sing the song, but I loved it when he did it. That's Domino, Blue Monday. How I hate Blue Monday. We don't hate it here. We're doing our show on Monday, so we got the Love Mondays, and we're coming again today on a Monday at 2 o'clock. And we'll be here until 3, and we are looking forward to, let's see, what are we looking forward to? Looking forward to an A1 production of the program called What's Going On allpointstv.com. And if we don't come up to the standard that allpointstv.com demands of us, knowing these guys around here, they'll take you by your lapel and throw you out of here. Get out of here. You up here making our name, messing our name up, and we have this marquee name out here, and there's a big splash saying allpointstv.com, and you come here messing up and bringing the name down. So I got to make sure we do a A1 program today. I'm going to be doing a couple of things today on this program because I was watching Mark Levine's program last night, and these people get on the. I don't think they allow on TV. From what I see now, this based on what they put on there, and you start putting people on TV like Turley and Rue and some of the others. I don't think they put constitutional scholars on television. And Mark Levine is not a constitutional scholar, and listening to him last night is just every time I listen to him, it just confirms what is very very much apparent to those of us those who, if you study in this area, you can hear it very very well, and the lack of training that they have in this area, because you can't start telling me about what Madison wrote in his notes, and you're going to use that as a foundation to go into what you're saying about the Constitution, and never get around to what the Constitution says. I mean, they never. I notice that every time they do that, they either telling me what the framers said, and it's important to know what the framers said, but and then what the Supreme Court said. It's not bad to know what the Supreme Court said, but what does the Constitution say? That's the document of the land, and if you're going to be talking about you're a constitutional scholar, at least you should tell us about the Constitution. And they never get around to that. None of them do. And they were talking about because everybody wants to talk about whether or not Donald Trump was correct in going into another sovereign nation and pulling the president of that nation out of the nation and bringing him over to the United States and violating the sovereignty of another sovereign state, another nation that's sovereign. You know, whether or not there's a need for authorization by the Congress of the United States in order to bring that about. And so you listen, waiting for them to get around. What does the Constitution authorize, and what does it say? And you sit there for an hour. You have to go through commercials, and so it's an hour program. And you keep watching the clock and saying, when are they going around to talk about the Constitution? When you get around to talk about the document? Can we get around to the Constitution? And they never do, because they're not. You can't hear it, but I can hear it. They're not trained. They're just not trained in this area. And you can't be saying the things that they're saying. Now, I know that they'll tell you what some person spoke at the Constitution Convention in 1707, what he said, and what Sherman said. They'll go and talk about what different ones at that convention was saying as they were putting together the Constitution. And he was talking last night about Article 1, Section 8, and this authority that the Constitution gives. I want to say the authority that it gives. It gives authority. I want to say the authority. See, that's another thing I want to talk about. The Constitution gives authority to the Congress to declare war. But you see, their lack of training is that they don't see how you have to frame that so that you're stating it correctly. This is over their level here. I can tell you that right now. This is over their level. But I'm going to make a couple of points here that's beyond their understanding. I have to say that Mark Levy is a scholar, but he's not a constitutional scholar. And the more he talks about this area, the more that comes out. And you could hear it more and more and more that there's no training, and there's no training in this area because you can't say a lot of things I hear them say. And Alan Dershowitz, your comments when you were talking about this, you never talk about the Constitution either. You talk about, you get into legalese and want to tell us about the Supreme Court. And I hate to tell you this, but you're not talking about the Constitution by talking about the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court rulings, many of them, much of it has nothing to do with the Constitution. They're now talking about what the Supreme Court is going to say about the president's tariffs, and the Supreme Court is supposed to make a ruling, I guess, sometime this week or maybe next week, going to make a ruling on what does they're waiting to hear what the court says, or whether or not those tariffs can be enjoined by the President of the United States, since the Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says Congress have the power to tax. So they're waiting on the Supreme Court to tell them, because these people they're parrots. They don't realize they're parrots, but they are parrots. And I hear they're parroting by them always talking about what someone said at the convention or what someone said in the Federalist Papers. All of that is important to know that they said these things. But when you talk about the Constitution, what we want to know at that point, what does the Constitution say? And I notice an absence of that conversation and what they're talking about on these TV programs. So I'll be making some points here today that they're not making and that they're not qualified to make. I know that sounds braggadocious, but I have to just tell you the truth. You don't hear their lack of training, but I can hear the lack of training. You just can't say some things they're saying, and none of it has anything to do with what the document says. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm not trying to put anybody down, but when you're telling me that, when you're telling the audience you're going to talk about the Constitution and what it authorizes, I want you to tell me what it says, so that I can go and I don't need to go and do it, but so that we as listeners can go and check behind you, because you're on television. So okay, fine, that's an accomplishment, I guess. I'm not so sure anymore. But let's ask an accomplishment. They got you. They put you on television. They give you a nice salary and give you a time slot, and you could turn your TV set on that time, and that program's gonna be there. So that's an accomplishment. I give you credit for that. But when you tell me that you're going to be talking about the Constitution of the United States, I expect you to do that at some point before the program is over. And they were talking last night. I sat there for the whole hour. Well, of course, I taped it, so I sat there for. The program is not an hour. The program is 39 minutes because they have about 2/3 programming and 1/3 for the commercial. So it's 39 minutes to be exact. 39 minutes of programming, 21 minutes of the commercial, and you sit there for the hour, or for, in my case, bypassing a lot of it to get to the conversation. And you sit there, and then you see the clock winding down. You're saying to yourself, when are they going to do what they when are they going to get around to what they said they're going to do? Well, they said they're going to talk about the authorization. Can the president, in fact, carry out war? I mean, without it being authorized, does you have to go to Congress for the authorization and so on? So I'm going to lay out what the Constitution requires. I'm going to read it to you so I can show you what it requires. And if all the scholars in the country are right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and all of them are wrong, because people people say to me, when I say that they're wrong, all these people are wrong, they can't believe that. Did you come out of Harvard? Did you get your degrees from Brown? You know, the one where they had the upheaval the other day. Did you come out of those Ivy League, universities? And when you say no, then they want to shut you down, because then the question is, who are you? Where'd you come from? Eastern Michigan University. And here's what Eastern Michigan University is going to tell you. Thank you. I appreciate it, John. You saved my life. First of all, let me say this about Article 1, Section 8, since they have the 17 provisions in it that list what Congress can do. Congress shall, and then it lists 17 different things that Congress shall be able to do. But I want to read, before I get to Article 1, Section 8, and the 17 clauses therein, I want to get to Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1. Because until you go and point out what's said there, you don't really get an understanding of Article 1, Section 8, but you have to go to these other parts of the document before you get to that particular section, so as to be able to bring an understanding to what it's saying there and what it's not saying there as well. But here's what Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1 says. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, Okay. So we have established by Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, that all legislative powers are vested in the Congress of the United States. So if that then can be put to bed, because it says at the very beginning of the document, in the very first article, the first section, and the first clause of it, then when you agree with me, then if it says all legislative powers are vested in the Congress of the United States, then if Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is given authorization to Congress in 17 different areas, then when you have to agree with me on the fact then that either the Constitution is being redundant or those 17 clauses in Article 1, Section 8 are not legislative in design, because otherwise it's repetitive, isn't it? Isn't that true? Because in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, it says all legislative powers herein granted, and by the way, herein granted by whom? Herein granted by the states. The states are granting these powers. And where these powers are that they are in fact delegating, where are they delegated from? They are delegated, these 13 states are delegating these powers from the sovereignty of each state. That's what they have to, that's why each one is called upon in sufficient numbers agreed upon, that they must in fact have that many of those states that will endorse it. Otherwise, it has no standing, no legal standing, no constitutional standing, unless a certain number of those states, 2/3, will ratify the document. Took 2/3 of the states, 9 of them, to ratify the Constitution. The states have to do it. The federal government can't ratify itself because it didn't create itself. It was created by the states. So the states have to ratify it. They have to be on board with what the persons at that convention did. It has to be referred, after they finish what they did at the convention, they have to be referred back to the states for the endorsement of it, because they were sent there by the states. And being sent there, they went there in the representation of the states as their delegates, speaking the states' names from different states. All of them were there except Rhode Island. Rhode Island Senate delegates. They thought there was something fishy going on there. And they didn't send a delegate to that convention in Philadelphia. They thought that this was, they just didn't think that this was going to be an honorable meeting, and they didn't want to participate in it because they didn't think it had any credibility. Maybe they got in wind of some things that were going on as they were discussing things on the ground, because they went there with, someone went there with an agenda. But whatever they came up with there had no standing unless they took it back and convinced enough states to go on board in order to validate the work that they had done during the time period they had been there, from May the 25th, 1787 until September the 17th of that year. And they did some unbelievable work during that time period. And they, of course, left the notes. Yates did notes there, and Madison's notes probably the best that were taken about what different members, different delegates said. Madison's notes probably the most comprehensive. And we know what was said there, but you're not showing a constitutional understanding by telling us what they said and bringing about the creation of the document. The question comes out of once the document has been drafted and they finished their work on the 17th of September of 1787, what did they come up with in the draft of the document so that we now can read it after they've been endorsed and ratified the following year, because it was ratified by the sufficient number of states to bring about the ratification of it. 9 states had to ratify it, and they did that. And what did they ratify, and what did the document say after they had brought about the ratification? Now, it doesn't have any amendments in it at this point, but it does have a provision in it for the document to be amended if that was so necessary in the following years. They didn't think that they had finished it up and they had finished everything needed to be done. They had a grounding point to start with, and then of course you have to amend it as needs will arise to show that there are some things need to be added to bring about further things to be concluded based upon the document. But you cannot rescind the document. You cannot rescind that which was the basis of the document being ratified. I'm probably the only scholar in this country that's saying this. You can add things to the Constitution that are unconstitutional by even though you've added it to the document. The 16th Amendment is a good example of that. The 16th Amendment is unconstitutional. Well, you see it's in the document. How can it be unconstitutional in the document? It's unconstitutional because you cannot amend original intent. The document, as it was written with those 7 articles in it, that was the intent of the document being drafted and ratified, and you can't go back and change that because you cannot sit back in that room and bring a document out again and send it to the state under different circumstances so that what they're ratifying doesn't say what it said when they ratified it in 1788. Do you scholars agree with that? You cannot pass an amendment that will rescind, alter, nullify that which was the basis upon which the document was in fact ratified in 1788. You can add through Article 5, you can add amendments to the Constitution, but you cannot add amendments to the Constitution that changes the document, the original intent of the document. Therefore, the 16th Amendment is unconstitutional, and also the 17th Amendment is unconstitutional. They've been put in the document, but those two amendments are unconstitutional amendments in the document. Do you scholars agree with that? Yeah, you want to tell me what somebody said at the convention, what they said, and this person said this, and that one said the other, and so on and so forth. You were talking about the war making body and so on. Okay, fine. Let's talk about that by the Constitution. Let's just deal with that for a minute. Because I'm going to correct Mark Levine and everybody else that they bring on there. Because if you say in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, all legislative power herein granted by that's in it's parenthetical, put in parentheses, granted by the states You see when it says hearing granted, it's about the states are granting this. So if in fact it says all legislative powers in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, and it's saying all legislative powers are in fact granted to the Congress of the United States, then why would it be necessary to then state the 17 items, the 17 parts of Article 1, Section 8? It has 18 clauses in it, but this 18th clause is just the carrying out of the 17. That's like what is necessary to carry the 17 things you just now say that the Congress can do. The 18th is saying they have the authority to, in fact, do that which is in fact necessary to bring that result about. The necessary the necessary clause of the Constitution, which they claim that it gives wide margin for the Congress to act in as if there's a void there. There's no void there, but what they're saying is that these 17 things that are mentioned, to carry that out, there's the power in order to do that within the particulars of what is being in fact mentioned. It doesn't mean to just run off and start doing everything and expanding the document and making it say things it doesn't say, or mean what it doesn't mean. Okay, so we're talking about Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. But I want you to be aware of the fact that the language that's used in the Constitution is very specific and has specific reasons for it being written the way it's written. And it's written that way because there are certain things to be understood in the language. For example, you have to know some, really, in order to read the Constitution, you really have to know something about English. You can't read you can't read the Constitution and not understand the English language. How the language is used. Because there are certain things in the language that if you don't understand English, I don't mean just pronouncing words, we can all do that, but if you understand how sentences are constructed to extract meaning, you miss out on a lot of things the Constitution is saying right in front of your face, but you won't get what it's actually saying. But I will tell you first of all this: if you are mentioning in Article 1, Section 8, those 17 clauses, and you're going down, Congress can do, Congress can, shall, and so on and so forth, then you have to then conclude, wouldn't you, that if you're saying that in Article 1, Section 8, Congress can, you're itemizing these things here. If it says in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, Congress has the authority, all authority, let me read it again to you. All, you see the word all there? All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in Congress. So then what are you doing in Article 1, Section 8 in those 17 clauses that's found there? I know it's 18 clauses altogether, but the 17 clauses we're saying Congress can. What is that? Why is that necessary if you said in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, all legislative power shall be vested in Congress of the United States? It's because these aren't legislative powers. It's already given the authority of legislative powers, but what it's doing now in Article 1, Section 8 is now listing some things that are extra added to the authority of the Congress of the United States. They already have the legislative authority based on Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1. Is that true or not? I just read the language to you. Doesn't that give them all the authority, the legislative authority to pass the laws and so on and so forth? Isn't that already put to bed in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1? Then what do you need Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 for that's mentioning 17 other items here? because here's what they're missing. They're missing two things in Article 1, Section 8. Number one, what they're missing when they talk about the authorization of war, they're missing, number one, that there is no definite article that's found there. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 says, and I'm going to read it. I can quote it, but I'm going to read the language to you. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. Let me read that. I'll find it. It's in here. They didn't change it. Come down to 11. I don't have it marked here the way they do the marking in some of the Constitution. They didn't mark it here in terms of 1, 2, 3. They don't do it here. You have to count it yourself. But but I know where it's located, because once I find Congress, you have the authority to declare war. That's number 11. It says that. Here's what it says here. So I have to count it down so I can get to that point. 11 says, after saying Congress have the power, shall power to, and it says lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare. And it goes on and says later on, get to number 11, it says to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Now, what it doesn't say is this. And this is very important. It does not say the. Which has the same authority in writing as it says specifically in writing in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, where it's talking about when it has that authority all to itself. If you use a definite article and says it has the authority is very different than saying it has the authority. Do you scholars agree with that? If I say that Congress has the authority, is there a difference in saying that and saying Congress has authority? Is there a difference between, I'm just asking you scholars, okay, is there a difference between those two? Congress has authority, and then to say it differently than said here, but to say Congress has the authority, is there a difference between those two? Would you say there's a difference? I'm going to tell you there is a difference here. And to say it has the authority is similar to what it would say then in a more expansive way, where it says in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, for example. I'm going to read that to you as well. Because it's not difficult to understand the Constitution. You're trained in it, but they're not trained in it. That's why they never get around to it. They don't understand this. None of them do. You can say you braggadocious. I'm not braggadocious. I'm telling you that they're not quoting this document. And if they are quoting the document, why don't they ever show us where they're quoting it from? Because the document has specific language in it. It's found in specific places in the document. One of the things I said some months ago here is that you have to understand the geography of the Constitution of the United States. Nobody's ever said that before. There's a geography of the Constitution. You have to that is say that it is specifically referenced in specific places in the Constitution by design. It's a design document. When they weren't sitting there with their feet up on like they did that in that that movie that they made about Reconstruction, where they were trying to put down how bad it was in the Congress at that time, and there were people up there with their feet on the desk, shoes off, and they're waving their foot, and just all this chaos in there. What was that film called? They were making a mockery, trying to act like Reconstruction was so much chaos and so on and so forth. It was nothing like that. So this was a very serious meeting, and they were sitting there doing serious business. And once they put one thing to bed, they had to now do the next part and make sure it did not contradict what they already had done. And so they had to have people that were doing oversight of it to put the document together so that it was creaseless and it was non-contradictory. That's the thing that really jumps off the pages when you read the document. So in looking at Article 1, Section 8, in this authority that is in fact given by the states to the Congress, after them saying that all legislative power should be given to Congress, now they're mentioning 18 clauses, 17 of them saying they can do this, they can do that, Congress can do the other thing. Why are they mentioning that again in Article 1, Section 8? It's already mentioned in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1. It's because these are not legislative powers. They're now given this extension of the powers, but it doesn't say in the extension of the powers, because it says the power, Congress has power. Let me read this to you. Let me find Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. Congress have power to declare war. Not the power to declare war. It's power to declare war. Why? Because it's an extension of the power Congress has, because it's not a legislative power. It's an extension of the power. It's extending the power it has, but it does not do it singly to the Congress of the United States. Is that right, you scholars? Are you reading this document here on TV? Is this a document you're referring to on television, these television shows? Where have you mentioned this document? When have you called this document and stated it, the language in it? I have not watched every program you put on TV with these scholars on it, but the ones I watch, I can tell you this, I haven't seen one yet where they have discussed the Constitution of the United States. I haven't seen one, not one time, not one scholar, not Levine, not Turley, not Rue, not any of them. They don't do that. And I don't think they're on there, and I don't see it because I try to make sure I tune them in to listen to what they're talking about. And they're not talking about the Constitution of the United States. They're talking about the Supreme Court. They're waiting right now to find what the court's going to say about terrorists. But you see, there's no definite article in the placement of this authority before the Congress, giving it to the Congress, because it's an extension of the authority of the court, but it's not specific to the Congress of the United States. It's an extension, not I said court. It's an extension of the authority of the Congress, but it's not limited to the Congress because of the absence of the definite article the. The word, if it said here, Congress shall have authority to declare war. That's what it says, to declare war. It would be different in saying it, which in a way in which it doesn't say it in the document. Congress should have the authority to declare war, because if it says the authority, that's the same thing as saying in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, where it says it more explicitly when it says the soul, because the is just as definite the word as the word soul is. Do you agree with that? Look, before you get to Article 1, Section 8, you got to go to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, because you're on the way to Article 1, Section 8. So let's go and see what they did in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Let me read that to you. We got to count it down again because it's not listed here in that way. In this, I have many different, constitutions that I refer to, whichever I have one I can find. But here's Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Let me count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. That's categorizing it in a specific part of the government, and no other government can play that role, because the definite article in this case here, the definite article is a definite phrase. You see, they're saying the sole power, but if they just said the House shall have the power, if it said the power, it would be saying the sole power. But it spells it out and says the sole power, because the sole power is the most explanatory explanation of that. They don't necessarily thinking about that at that time, but that's what they did. No other body of the government can bring about impeachment except the House of Representatives. The sole power. Or if it said the power, it would be the same thing. But it doesn't say, when they're talking about war, it does not say that the Congress should have the power. It doesn't say the power. It says the Congress should have power to declare war. There's a distinction I'm saying here to be made. I'm the only one saying it, but they're not going to say anything about this. Well, they don't understand this. Now, why are they listing these items to the Congress in Article 1, Section 8? because they're extra to what is already given to the Congress in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1. That's why. It is not an expansion of that power, which is the power to make lawmaking. It's not expansion of the powers that Congress has. Then there's no need to list it, because if it's legislative power, you already stated in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1. Is that right? Do you scholars agree with that? That's already put to bed in Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, very beginning of the Constitution of the United States. What it's saying here, though, is that in addition to, that's why there's no definite article there, but it's an extension of the authority. But it's not singular to the Congress of the United States. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Why is it not singular to the Congress? Because it does not abrogate the authority of the President of the United States. The reason why the President is put on the same scale as the co-equal branch of the government along with the Congress of the United States is because the mandate of the two is the same in terms of the authority given to it by the same the same people in the delegation of that authority. For example, the states. The states are made up of, the reason why you have, there's so many things I want to say about this, and I don't want to get off my topic, but there are so many things that need to be said. But when you say the House, and you have to, the laws got to be passed by the House and the Senate and submitted to the president. The reason why it's going to the president is because the president is on the same authority as they are. Why? Because if it takes the House and the Senate, that's all the people that are voting in the country are voting for the ones in the House and Senate. And then the people are voting for the President of the United States. That puts them on the same scale, because the persons that have put the members in the Congress are cumulatively in their case. Yeah, because each state is represented there. 2 senators, and then the members of the House through the districts of the states. But in terms of the President of the United States, the totality of all the states combined collectively elect the President of the United States. That puts them in the same co-equal branch. They are co-equal in their distinct branches of government, but they are co-equal because the authority is in fact equal to each other. Has anybody ever said that before? Do they say that on television? That's why the president. That's why the president's authority is co-equal authority, because the authority is invested from the same source as the authority of the Congress. Now, the Congress is just made up of, let's say it was just made up of the House of Representatives. And I want to be very careful here with the statement here, but if it was just made up of the House of Representatives, would that be sufficient? Because the states are represented, the Constitution recognizes the states as a mouthpiece of that which is putting this together. So the states have done it. So the mouthpiece of states really is the Senate. That's their representation in the Congress. So I have to say the House of Representatives and the Senate. But look at how that is set up. So that's one branch of government. The House and Senate is the makeup of the Congress. But the president is the totality of the same representation because all the people of the states vote for the president of the United States. They vote for the president. And that polity in his is vested in the office of the president, the executive branch of government. That polity that he represents is an equal branch, no less so, no more so, but certainly no less so than they are. When they start talking about what the Congress is going to say about this, or the Supreme Court going to say about this, what makes you think that they're conjuring up what the document says gives them any more authority over the conjuring up the document's meaning than what the president, in fact, does? What makes their conjuring up the meaning of the document more so than the president of the United States? And the reason people think that's true is not true, but the reason the way they think it's true is because they've gotten confused about this word Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not even capitalized in the Constitution of the United States. Because that's not why it puts Supreme in that document. I know people not saying this, but they better not say anything about it that is different than what I'm saying, because they're not qualified to say the things that are different than what I'm saying. I'm sorry, that's just a fact. Supreme Court doesn't mean they have the last word in anything in terms of this. Have to waiting with bated breath to hear what the Supreme Court's going to say, as if their voice is mandatory for the other co-equal branches of government to listen to them, as if they have the last word in anything about a document we can all read. Where does that authority come from? It comes from, I tell you, I know where it comes from. It comes from getting off the page of the Constitution with John Marshall with judicial review in 1803, and McCulloch in the Marbury versus Madison case. That's where the problem comes. This idea of judicial review. Judicial review of what? You're going to have the judicial review of the Constitution then, because the Constitution has already been authorized and has been ratified in 1788. Before the court is even established, you got to ratify the document. Before you have a president of the United States, you have to ratify the document. George Washington cannot even become president before the Constitution is ratified. That's why Washington doesn't take office until 1789. Look, it's very simple. This is not complex. They make it complex because they just going all over the place with a lot of nonsense. I know who said what at the convention, but the question is what finally was agreed upon and what was put in writing, because that you can then run with, because that's what they came out and stated. Because a lot of murmuring goes on, a lot of disagreement was going on back and forth, but what they actually came up and what they wrote, that's what we have to rely upon. And if you don't go and talk about what they actually wrote, even though you talk about the Federalist Papers and all the rest of it, if you actually talk about what the document says, you're not actually dealing with the Constitution of the United States, because here's a document right here. The courts are not given the sole authority to declare war. In fact, the Congress is very limited in warfare, because Congress can declare war, but it cannot make war. And the president can do both. That's a distinction that's got to be made. There is nothing in this document that commands the President of the United States to have called anyone up to tell them what he's getting ready to do in terms of what was done in Venezuela. I didn't like what was done in Venezuela, quite frankly. And I don't like this discussion that's going on right now with this imperial president talking about they're going to do Greenland either the easy way or the hard way. Boy, that is really something. We have an imperial president now.
I'm so glad you said that because so many conservatives, I say, they're always against all this other stuff normally, but since Trump wants to do it, oh, yeah, you got to understand if we don't get it, China or Russia's going to get it. I went, okay, you're missing the point. There are people living there. They have a right to decide where they want to. They're living there under somebody else. I think it's Denmark. Denmark. Okay, so why do we got a right to take people who are enslaving them? We're putting them under America. We're going to tax them. We're going to do this to them. Why? Why? I mean, we've had plenty of opportunity to do this before this. Why didn't anybody else feel the need to do it? Has it changed that dramatically? I think with the surveillance and the satellites we got now, we got a better chance of detecting movement from China or Russia than we did now. I mean, before. So I don't understand the need for this now. I don't.
This is the imperial president that we have now, and we've gone to the point where you can support Trump as being the best of the lot that's out there, and the rest of it, he came from the outside, and that's also a good thing. You don't need these persons coming up through the chain, then all the things that are broken, they come up through that brokenness, and then they're broken up by the time they get to the end of it. But you have to also understand that the Constitution has not been obliterated because of the outsider coming in. The document stands as read, and it's true. On the one hand, he doesn't have to go to the Congress to get there to inform them he's getting ready to act as a co-equal branch of the government. Who has the authority? Who would have the authority? Think about this for a minute. Who would have the authority of the President of the United States, who is singularly the custodian of the second branch of the government of the United States? He is that branch. None of the ones in the House and none of the ones in the Senate are the single branch of the government in terms of the legislative branch. They are in the House, they are one of 435 others, 435 altogether. And then the Senate, they are one of 100. So look at the percentage that they each represent. The president is singularly the authority in one branch of the government all by himself, and he's the only one in the government like that. They thought about a committee of more than one for the president of the United States, maybe 2 or 3, 4 persons, but they came up with, looking at that giant sitting there as the president of the convention, kept looking at that chair, that man in that chair there, great president, the greatest president this country has produced, the father of the country. Yeah, you could say Madison and father of the Constitution, but look at the father of the country, and they're sitting there, and they are assured of the good hands. This is before Allstate got the claim. They were assured of the good hands the country was in with George Washington because he had already approved it. On many occasions, by the way. You'd be surprised of reading. Go read John Ferling's book. John Ferling has a book out called The Ascent of Washington. And I got to say this, this is QTN running comment. I'm reading a great book right now. just started it. I never read anything by this author before. I'm reading now a book called The Burglary. And I'm going to read some more of her books because, boy, that book, I can hardly wait to get back to read it, read some more of it today. I'll have it read by I'm certainly going to have it read by the end of the week. It's called The Burglary. The Burglary. And the author's name is Betty Medsger, 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 Betty Medsger. She wrote wrote a whole book on the burglary because this is during the time period when we had an awakened citizenry. They don't want that anymore. They don't want that. They created that through television by showing the Vietnam War and waking the citizens up by showing them what was happening in Vietnam, and they pricked people's conscience because that's not the country they were taught they were living in. They saw it for themselves on the TV set, and this group decided that they were going to. They didn't think that the FBI was in fact following the Constitution by what they were saying going on here, but they had to have documents because everybody had revered at that point in time J. Edgar Hoover, who was almost like a god in the government. And what they did, what this burglary is about, the whole book is about the burglary and the aftermath of the burglary, how they plotted it and planned it. And they planned it, by the way, the same day as the fight between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. When Ali came back in the boxing world after being silenced for 3 years, they knew it was going to be a big event. They had to have a cover when they thought that everybody would be riveted to watching that fight, and they were going to do the break-in on that day. It's unbelievable. I'm just on page 100 of the book right now, but I'm telling you, that book is unbelievable. The whole book is around the break-in. The burglary is called The Burglary. Because these person broke into the FBI headquarters in a place called Media, Pennsylvania. Because they wanted to try to get the FBI files to see what the government what the FBI was doing behind the scenes, and they found out what the government was in fact doing behind the scenes. It was consciously trying to, in fact, create paranoia so a person would feel cowed down, not to challenge the power of the government to do what the government is in fact doing, and don't question, even though what it's doing is outside the pages of what's allowed by the Constitution of the United States. Trump doesn't get a pass here about what he's doing right now. Talking about we're going to do it either the easy way or the hard way. And he's going to talk about whether they can either give Denmark can either say yes to this takeover. What's it going to be, the 51st state by takeover? Or what would be its status based upon that? Either the easy way or the military way, because they're now flexing their muscles because look what they've accomplished. Look what they've done with the military. They spend all this money in the military. They want to make some use of it. But the Constitution has something to say about how that use is to be made. And yes, the president can do what he did in the case of Maduro, because there was a indictment of Maduro in the courts in New York, and what he was doing was carrying out they kept saying they wanted the man brought in put on trial, and everybody, they talk all that stuff they talk, and Donald Trump carried it out. They didn't have any problem when they carried it out against Noriega. They have a problem carrying it out because it's with Donald Trump that did it. But that does not mean that Donald Trump, because he has the authority to assert war and the authority to, in fact, make war. Only Congress can only, in fact, declare war, cannot make war, doesn't have any war-making capacity. That's the irony over there in Minnesota. This guy, they all want to talk about, they want to do this, and the other thing, and then in order to do it, they're going to use the this guy that's the governor of the state, Tim Walz. They're talking about they want to get ICE out of there and so on and so on. And then what they get to rely upon what? They're not going to do it. You think that this Jacob, what's Jacob's last? Jacob, his name just missed me, right? The one that's the mayor of Minneapolis. Yeah, this guy talking about he wants using that profanity. This man has no class. Using that profanity, he wants ICE out of there. And then talking about we don't, get the so and so out of Minneapolis, as if he's going to do it. If he's going to do it, he's got to rely upon the very body that he is, in fact, not supportive of. He's not supportive of the law enforcers of the country. These persons are, I said this in a post the other day, and I stand by it. These people are anarchists. You need to read that post today. Because the best hiding place for anarchists is not outside the government. The best place for anarchists to hide is inside the government, because we don't expect to see anarchists inside of our government. That's where they are. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that the president can, in fact, both make war, and he can also declare war, because it does not take the authority from him, by which states in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, because it does not say in that part of the Constitution that the Congress shall have the authority to declare war. It does not have the word "the" there, nor does it say the "so." But if it say either one of those, it would be specific to the Congress of the United States. But it's not specific, because what it does, it expands the authority of the Congress, because it's not a legislative power. That's why it's listed again in Article 1, Section 8. I wanted to point that out to you scholars, because you're not there. And the president does not have to, in fact, get authorization to defend this country. We'll see what happens with Denmark, because that's going to be a whole different can of worms there. And if that takes place, that might be something we want to look at under another provision of the Constitution, and that's under the impeachment provision of the Constitution at that point. And Donald Trump needs to walk very lightly in terms of this grabbing, because we do have a military that's now proving its prowess, but there's still the Constitution of the United States we have to reckon with in this country. Okay, I got to get out of here. The document has not gone away, and I suggest these scholars read it for a change and try to understand what it says, because right now, I don't see anybody out there who understands it. Sorry to say that, but I don't see it. They don't put them on television, that's for sure. Okay, I got to get out of here until next week. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.